Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Con Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, that's AMPIRE. And of course, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. Throughout the week, I'll update the news from Commander's facility. I'm also going to have a story later this week about Vince Lombardi's coaching one season in Washington. That, of course, is where he ended his career. You probably know that, but there are a lot of people who do not. So that's why we write the story. Anyway, some interesting stuff that in talking to various people, Larry Brown, Mike Bragg, Chris Hamburger, Mike Bass, and some conversations that I've had throughout the years. So look for that later this week. In a minute, I'll get to my conversation with former Washington tight end Chris Cooley. We talk about the quarterbacks, and we talk about them in part because of the news from today that Carson Wentz is undergoing surgery on Monday in Los Angeles to repair his fractured finger. We don't know yet the timeline, and we're not going to probably know that tonight. There is a fear for how long it could be because when quarterbacks fracture a finger, sometimes it can be up to 6 weeks. We don't know how long it's going to be, so I'm not reporting how long it may be because we don't know. What gives them pause with this is, first of all, they want to hear from the surgeon. Secondly, because it's the ring finger and not an index finger or a middle finger, they're hoping that maybe it's not as long of a recovery period. So we will update that. We'll update this story for you throughout the week. That's where you go to ESPN.com. So, or you can go to Twitter at John_Kime, but ESPN.com will have all the news as well. So I will get to now, by the way, Taylor Heinicke will replace Wentz as a starter for however long he would miss. People keep asking about Sam Howell. There's a gap between the two, and there's a gap. When you're trying to win games, you're not going to try and see what a guy can do, not when you're 2-4 and the wild card is still sitting there, whether you think they can make it or not. So Taylor Heinicke will be the guy because, again, there is a gap. This is not about what fans need to see. This is about players and coaches needing and wanting to win. That's why they go to Heinicke. Anyway, I'll get into all of that with Chris Cooley. We'll talk about playing a guy in Howell's situation compared to a guy like Heinicke, what he's thought of, what he thinks of Heinicke, what he has thought of Carson Wentz this year, the offense in general. We get into some X's and O's with like hot routes and, Scott Turner's offense. We talk about Ron Rivera for a minute. And if there's any hope, if he sees any hope when he watches these games, because he has been watching these games, and also what he's up to these days. Anyway, that's it from me. And again, pay attention to ESPN.com the rest of the week for updates on this whole situation. And there you go. So let's get to my conversation with former Washington tight end Chris Cooley. All right, Chris, before we get to the football stuff and, Heinicke, Wentz, all that good stuff, let people know what you've been up to. I know you've had a lot of projects again on your property. So what's going on with Chris Cooley right now?
First of all, it's nice to actually watch football. I didn't watch football last year, and I actually missed everything this weekend because we took a trip through Yellowstone Park, which is beautiful this time of year. But yeah, we're building a new house. We live in as you can see, a log cabin that is nice, but not exactly what we love. So I'm in the process of building a new house, and I'm sort of the contractor on it. I'm absolutely the contractor on it, and it's a lot. It's a lot of decisions. It's a lot of process. It's a lot of stuff, and seems to be every day for me right now. But I actually really enjoy it, Kime.
I know you do. I know you do. Yeah. And I don't know if I'm divulging anything, but like the wrestling room that you're building for your son too.
Yeah, we are in the process of building what is known here as a shop, which is essentially a large garage. If I say, we're building a shop first, it sounds crazy to most of my friends back in Virginia, Maryland, but everyone here has a shop. So it's a detached large garage, essentially. But we're building an upstairs to it where it fits a mat and a half for a wrestling room. There's just certain things, and I don't know if this is everywhere with kids, and I would do anything for my kids, but wrestling is something my son's absolutely been in love with, even as a 4-year-old last year. And it's hard to get them on a mat whenever you want to get them on a mat.
Right.
And you ask even a 4 or 5-year-old to compete and win. And he wrestled in 7 tournaments, and he wanted to wrestle in more. It was over. He didn't understand, why is wrestling over, Dad? But you're asking them to go, and wrestling is not t-ball or Little League baseball, where everyone hits and everyone runs around the bases and they don't keep score. You win or you lose. And by the way, he's an incredibly sore loser, which we learned last year. We already knew a little bit, but he does not want to lose. And so we're gonna build a wrestling room, and then we can have his friends over and anyone over and wrestle whenever we want. And it's part for us too, in the process of building a new house. We talked about doing sort of a gym area, and I hate having the gym in my house because then I never use it. Maybe if I have to walk about 100 feet to where I have a shower and a room to do it, it's not my own home, I'll use it there. So multifunctional, Kime.
There you go. How much of that competitiveness does he get from you? Were you like that?
So I was absolutely like that. I hated to lose. One of my non-favorite moments about myself was my senior year at Logan High School playing baseball, and I struck out, I think, for the second time, and I played center field, and I then proceeded to slam my bat and go get my glove, and I kicked it all the way to center field, which my mom told me she would never come and watch me play again if I ever did that. I don't know how my coach let me continue to play that game.
I'm shocked at that.
Full tantrum. That said, we played in a co-ed softball tournament about 3 weeks ago, and my wife struck out, and she slammed her bat and said some profanities. So I think it comes from both sides.
It usually does. You're watching games again this year. Why not last year?
Well, first of all, it's not any parent, I think, understands this. And last year, my kids were 7 and 4, and at this point, 8 and 5. And you do things on the weekends. Right. My daughter's in school. We try to do things on the weekends. Sunday's a great day to go skiing, or in the fall to take kids fishing or camping. And so last year we were busy. It really had to do more with having young kids around. And for some reason, over the last couple Sundays, we had a birthday party at a friend's house where football was on all day. So the kids had their birthday party, and we watched a couple games of football, and we were at a cabin the week before camping, and we had DirecTV, so we watched football on Sunday. But it's really actually enjoyable. I think I've talked about this with you before, but in calling the Washington games and playing, you never really see games.
Right.
And so it's fun to get a chance to watch some other games. I've watched 3 of the Commanders games live, which hasn't been very much fun. No. I'm wondering why I'm not watching like the Bills play or one of the better games of the week, but I seem to tend to watch Washington. It's just nice to really have just a fan's interest in what's going on in the NFL without anything pressing.
Right. And I know you go on Kevin Sheehan's show and talk about, the Commanders, obviously. And so I do want to ask about that. And as we record this, we don't have an update yet on Carson Wentz's finger, how much time he'll miss. This is Monday morning. We'll find that out probably Monday night, what's going on there. But I do want to start there. What have been your impressions of Wentz thus far?
The first impression is that without immediate answers, I don't think he's comfortable in essentially solving the problem or finding solutions or getting through progressions. It's not been great as far as time in the pocket for Wentz either. And maybe some of that's on Wentz, maybe some of that's on line, play calling. But Wentz has really struggled, in my opinion, getting the ball to his first read in with some anticipation. I think he needs to see his first read open more times than you'd like it to see it open instead of just letting the ball go. A lot of times it's an extra hitch and it's patting the ball a little bit too long. And then 2, because he's staying on that too long, I don't think he gets to 2 and 3 quick enough. And so he's struggling to get across the board through progressions. It's not that he hasn't done it. He's done it. He's just not doing it on a regular basis. And he's struggling a lot with that. And then two, he's been really inaccurate. And I think even more so watching this last week's game and not watching it, because I've watched them all on the all 22 and on film. And some of that you don't entirely see. McKissick 4 yards downfield and the velocity on some of the balls that he's throwing. Like I think the lack of touch to underneath throws with the inaccuracy makes them really, really tough to haul in. You know, when you get that ball coming 60 miles an hour at your knee behind you, you can get your hand on it and anyone can say, man, that's a ball that could be caught. It's just not a ball that gets caught often.
Is that, for some of that stuff, is that trust, familiarity with offense, or do you think it's just him?
Well, I think a big part of the inaccuracy right now is him. I'm not sure exactly what he's got to go through to fix that. I do think being uncomfortable in the pocket is not aiding him at all in being able to make some of those throws, as far as just relax and just get it to your guy. You know, the other thing you see with Carson, and I was a huge Carson Wentz fan in Philadelphia, and I still like Carson Wentz. I do. I enjoy watching him play. But he was capable of moving in the pocket and making so many big plays off schedule and off script in comparison almost to what Josh Allen does in Buffalo for a little bit in Philadelphia. And I mean, anyone that watched him play for the Eagles, even in DC, was going, wow, this guy is a huge problem. And so because he was able to evade and get out of the pocket and make some of those big throws, I think maybe some of the issues were not seen with Carson Wentz. And right now, he's not capable of moving and running and scrambling the way he was 3 years ago before some of the injury stuff. He's just not that guy. And I've also thought about that a lot with myself and watching not just Carson, but guys as they've evolved and changed in their careers. You don't always recognize that in yourself. It's tough to recognize. Your brain's telling you, this is me. This is the play I make. I know I can make this play. And I go back to the year after my knee surgery, thinking I was hauling ass or thinking I was making quick cuts and bursting out of things. And then you watch it on film, and even then, it's still you. So you kind of give yourself the benefit of the doubt, but you don't have that full realization that I'm not that fast or I'm not that quick, because you used to be, and your mind sees it that way. And I think that probably some of Carson's problem is maybe that in a little bit, that when he starts to move right or left, or like there was for instance, he was run down in the Tennessee game. And I'm terrible with names, and I should be better, but 98's a stud. I get it. Yeah, Simmons is a stud. But 3 years ago, Carson Wentz would have outrun Simmons to the sideline, and Simmons hawked Carson Wentz down really from behind. And you look at that and say, well, I'm sure he's saying, did he seriously just get that guy really fast, I guess? But it's not. It's that he's not as fast. So go ahead, Cam.
No, I was going to ask you about that, about the limitations. Like, to me, his immobility has limited the offense, given the problems in protection. And that's where, like, when you look at a guy like Heinicke, could he give a jump start just because of that?
Yeah, I think the answer, and I think you're going to see it this week, is yes. And I don't want to sit here and say Heinicke is a better quarterback than Carson Wentz.
Right.
I think Carson Wentz, even right now, does have more upside. And And a lot of that is, does Carson Wentz continue to work and fit in with the team the way he's supposed to, and not some of the things that happen in Philadelphia? And I mean, take out all the extracurriculars, which is not really fair. I think Carson does still have more upside, and I think he has the ability to evolve and a bigger arm and can make some different throws. But right now, what Washington really needs is to get the ball in the hands of some of these receivers earlier so they can make plays. And that's what Heinicke is going to be able to do a little bit. And then Heinicke can absolutely evade and move to some of the pressures that they're going to have. It's not like Steve Young's coming in for Joe Montana here.
Right.
Like just so we're clear on it.
Yeah.
But it to some extent, it might be more like Todd Collins is coming in for Jason Campbell. I don't know if it doesn't make them a go out and win every game team, and now you're a playoff team, and I think it gives them, an early boost to what they can do. And also Heinicke is going to be very familiar with this offense, and it was Wentz's first offense that was not a Andy Reid type offense in his career. So he had to learn a lot as well. And there's a huge learning curve. I've seen that. I had a lot of different quarterbacks, and I saw it with all of them. And it's at least a better part of a season before most of the guys I was around really started to feel comfortable with their anticipation of the offense. So, yeah, I think Heinicke will probably come in and give a little boost. I would bet that. But you're also saying, is he going to throw for more than 90 yards against the Bears? Carson had a couple bad outings.
Yeah.
I don't see them going away from Carson Wentz if he's healthy, or if there's a chance for Carson to play. I think they'll stick with Carson. I think if they can fix the finger, tape it, there's so many different ways you can break your finger, have some of those injuries. I remember I shattered my finger, and it was the year I hurt my knee, or my knee was bad, and we used the finger, and I had surgery as a real excuse to essentially go on the IR for the end of the year. But I was really told when they put all the screws in my finger, it was potentially one game to miss.
Oh, okay.
So how they fix it and what is, I don't know. I haven't.
Yeah, we don't know yet,
doctor. But sometimes fingers are not 6-week injuries.
Right, and we don't know yet. I know there was a fear of that, but until we know for sure, I don't know. But I do, if Heinicke has to go in, then I wanted to address him. What have you thought of him as a passer? I mean, the way they considered him always was high-end backup, low-end starter. What have you thought of him in the past?
I would say high-end backup, low-end starter, and in that you get a guy that can give you a boost, who knows the offense, who knows the system. But I don't think when you say low-end starter, at any point, you're talking about a guy that you can survive a season with.
Right.
You're not talking about a guy that's going to lead you to a championship in most instances. So I think survive a season with Heinicke is great. And more so, in that, almost like the Todd Collins thing, you have a chance to make a run late and your starter goes down. He's going to give you a chance to win every game that you're in. Right. He's not going to go win games for you more times than not. He's going to let you survive and have a chance to win some ball games. And I think that's really what Heinicke provides, more times than not, week in and week out. They'll give you a chance to win a ball game. The other thing that I would bet you is going to be nice for, Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel and Gibson and all. When a guy that really has a feel for the system comes in, you operate better, and they're going to see that. You're going to see a change in touches for more of the guys and speed of the offense. It would be my guess.
Right. And the other thing is I get this a lot, and I have my own thoughts. And if Wentz can't play, you put in Heinicke, he gives you the best chance to win right now. They did draft a rookie in Sam Howell, and there are a lot of Howellians out there who want him to play. If you're a veteran and you see, because I know fans think, oh, they're 2-4, they're not going anywhere. Coaches and players don't feel like that at this point, right? They're not going to say, oh, the season's over because we struggled early. But what would be the danger of putting in a guy like Howell? And I know you're not familiar with them and all that, but the danger of putting in a guy, 5th-round pick, hasn't played, etc. Or what would you think of that?
Well, first of all, it's hard to really say this, but it's not hard to say this. Point blank, we're all independent contractors, and having a better year helps us individually. There's no end of the year at 2-4. Nobody, if you're going to be a free agent or you're whatever, you're not going to decrease your own value because you're tired of a season at 2-4.
Right.
You go play. Everyone's out to play for themselves. It's a lot of fun, and it's exciting to win as a team. And for me, especially, you get into year 3, 4, 5, and you really start to develop a love of that team, that organization, the fans that surround that team. and there's more of a commitment to winning for your team. But it's not high school football, or to some extent, not even college football, where it's dire. You feel that dire need to win week in and week out. And I'd be lying if I told you there were games that I played really well and we lost, that I was pleased with myself at minimum. That I still won some of those games personally.
Right. Well, because you're right. I mean, it's about value.
And I think I had 10 or 11 catches and 100 yards and a touchdown. Like, go home and go, let's score a touchdown at Lambeau Field, and had 100 yards receiving. And yeah, I would like to have won too, but in the same hand, there were games that we won that I didn't play well and I was frustrated. So that didn't happen in high school. You won and that was it. So I don't think that you get to that point. There's a ton of pressure from the outside for a lot of these players, not just with Ron and potentially what would happen with Ron, and with what's going on with the owner, and everyone feels that. It would be hard not to feel that, but you go in, you show up, and the day of work starts, and you're involved in that. And for the coaches as well, like right now, you're not just going to put in Howell to develop a guy to see because maybe he's there next year. I think they need to win games. I think that having a 4-win season really puts the head coach's job in jeopardy. I don't have any clue what's going on with the inner workings of that, but a third year of not winning a lot of football games and not having your guy as a quarterback and not figuring out some things you need to figure out is not really good for head coach.
No.
Now, that said, you get to week 12, I think they'd be okay to see where Hal was if they knew they're out of the playoffs. I think at that point, you're not diminishing other guys' seasons and you're not taking opportunities from a lot of your team, and you're seeing what a quarterback could potentially be in the future. But I mean, honestly, the other thing you look at, and I know this is a big class of quarterbacks coming out, and potentially this is a year that at the end of the year that they draft one with Carson on a 1-year deal. But you do, to some extent, need to figure out if Carson Wentz can figure it out.
Right.
At one point, he was one of the top 15, top 10 quarterbacks in the league. It's brief, but is that guy still there somewhere? And can he evolve to be a little bit different than he was, but still that guy? That's something you got to look at. The problem with that is it's so funny on a 1-year deal. If he does become that, then what do you pay him?
Well, he does have a couple more years. It's just that there's no guaranteed money. Right. So they can move on after this year. So with no cap penalty, they can move on. So he is signed, but if it doesn't go well and a new staff comes in, they're cutting him without any problem.
I understand. But if Carson Wentz really well, he's going to want a new deal.
If he showed at the end of the year, if he gets really hot and they do well, I could see them doing something. But you're right. I think the hard part too with Howell is if he gets to week 12 and they put him out there, and that's fine. It probably could be a new staff coming in, and you may have a top 10 pick, and so you're going to go get another quarterback anyway. So, unless he is somehow lights out. But
the other thing, Al, Kime, is it's not really fair to put a later round draft pick quarterback in if he's not ready to go in. It's not fair to him, and have a better feel.
I don't know if he is or isn't.
Yeah, they should have a better feel for, could he really execute a game plan? And can he operate, or is he going to end his career essentially in the first year?
And I don't know. I don't know where he's at with that, and that's something we'll find out a little bit more this week. Also, when you look at this offense, and I talked about this with you a little bit on the phone, but there was a play against the Bears, and it's just one of those plays where I'm like, I don't understand why somebody can't attack this area and it was the blitz. It was that first blitz. It was like a 3rd and 6 or 7. Essentially, it's a 3 receiver route, and there's 3 defensive back, but they're all behind the sticks. So the blitz comes, and the middle of the field is wide open, and you have McLaurin and Samuel in the stack, and nobody's attacking the middle. Like nothing is broken off to account for a blitz coming, etc. I'll be honest, I don't get, and it's something I want to ask more about this week. And I've been harping on this because the middle of the field is wide open. It's an easy first down if somebody just breaks off their route, if they have the freedom to break off that route. So do you remember that play? And why do some offenses use hots and some not?
Well, some offenses use hots because they don't have built-in answers for imminent pressure that they can't block. And I think that particular play earlier in the game where Smith comes through is a zero blitz. It's all out blitz, which means they're bringing one more than you can protect with, because you can't protect with the quarterback. And Washington's in a max protect situation where they struggle on this, and where they're struggling with a lot of these is when you're in that max pressure situation, you can't give up A or B gap pressure. You can't give up immediate interior pressure. You're asking your quarterback to potentially drift right or left from one side or the other where he knows he's not protected to get a ball out. You want that pressure to come from the edge rusher. And then you see a quarterback start to move. If it's off his left edge, he'll start to drift right, make the throw. He's not able to do that because they can't pass off the interior stunt and blitz. And I think it's between the center and guard, right?
Yeah.
Where Smith comes. Yep. He essentially goes unblocked. And they've struggled all year to pass off some of those blitzes and stunts and to communicate as an offensive line. And there's a lot of different ways offensive lines do this. There's a lot of different calls that are made. But right now, Washington's struggling with it. They're sticking on their guy too long, and a guard's got a D-tackle, and maybe they man it up, and maybe it was a back that missed Roquan Smith, or maybe there's some other error. But they have to stop having some of these errors. If they want to give Carson Wentz a chance, you can't have immediate A or B gap pressure. That's a dead play. As far as the hots go, like I said, a lot of offenses will have built-in hots. I remember a meeting with Kyle Shanahan, or a couple where there's a certain play that we used a comeback as a built-in hot. I mean, that's an 18-yard comeback, but it's like lead him downhill to the sideline, and if it's incomplete, you survive a bad play. If that's the only answer we have on this, that's the only answer. But it's built in that they're throwing that. I'm not exactly sure how that's functioning for Washington. It doesn't seem like they have any red 7 hot routes. It's tough. But to that particular play, they are bringing one more than you can protect. So you are in a hot situation. You have a free rusher because you cannot block 8 with 7. It's just not going to happen. And even if you let your back get out on, they'll peel their pressures if your back and tight end release. They're manned up to see that pressure if they want to come off of it. But if your quarterback really sees it, and there were guys that would do this. I mean, I remember Brunell all the time. We'd get to the line or close to the line. He'd say, "Hey, if it's all out here, or whatever, just look at me."
Right.
Just find, or hey, if you got Samuel in the slot, I would literally yell red 7 at him. It's a joke from Wedding Crashers, but literally, yo. Just be quick. Be quick on this, because really, the amount of time it takes a receiver to run a 10-yard out route with the quarterback throwing it right before he comes out of that break is usually enough time to get the ball out. I mean, that's 1 second. If he can take that ball, hold it, just really hitch rock, drift a little, the ball can come out to throw something like that.
Do you think that's as much on Wentz maybe getting used to these receivers and them getting comfortable, or is that as much on, and again, this may require more inside information, but is that as much as a built-in function of the offense?
Well, I think that it's that play in particular is probably more of a function of the protection breaking down immediately, because Roquan Smith is going to be one of, the way we always did this too is when you had these zero pressures, is you had a list of numbers that are must block numbers. And then we always had a list of numbers. Your offensive line has a list of numbers 98, 93, 95, 91, 52. Those are the lists. We're always going to take care of those guys first. And then the backs would be responsible for, 37, 48. And you kind of eliminate through a process pre-game or through practice of what potentials you have as far as blocking guys. Roquan Smith is a must block there.
Yeah.
And so they missed somewhere up front. And it's hard to say always, was the line in a full slide right and your backside guard didn't slide? Or are they in a dual situation where they're going to post and then turn and pass it off? Are they in a full man situation? And that makes it tough with some of that stuff. I don't know. And it's also a game. Like I said, I was out of town and I've been watching the All-22. It's also tough to tell when you're watching a live game on television where exactly that broke down and missed.
Right. And, and you always hear about like providing answers for the quarterback. How were some of the other coaches? I think you brought up Jim Zorn with some answers or non-answers for quarterbacks.
Well, I did bring up some of the blitz meetings with Zorn, and I think it was interesting because, and I don't want to really, there were some confusion moments in meetings with protections and how it was handled. And I think the other thing I don't want to do is, because Joe Bugle was the offensive line coach at that time, and Buggs really did know how to pick up a lot of the things. And Buggs' answer in a lot of the situation was a lot with Joe Gibbs, where we're going to max protect. And Zorn didn't want to max protect in a lot of those deals. And so I think figuring out how to pick some of the stuff up was maybe not agreed completely upon, or was confusion between Buggs had one answer and was going to coach it one way, but Zorn changed it. It just, if everybody's not on the same page and there's not resolution to what we're going to do with pressure, then you're in trouble. And you have to practice a lot of these pressures, and you have to practice a lot of these looks week in and week out in practice. And they do. I'm sure they have a blitz pickup period and work on a lot of that stuff. The other thing that I always, Mike did this, and I thought this was really good. And a couple coaches I've been around did some of these things where you got a 4 minutes at the end of practice with exotic pressures that you hadn't seen, or your defense is going to bring whatever pressures they're going to bring that week, and we're going to use our protection to pick up their pressures. Obviously, we didn't game plan for our own defense, so now you have their all outs versus your protections and how you're going to handle it. And so you really have to communicate, because you can watch as much film as you want. Everyone's going to change their pressures the next week.
Last thing then, when you're looking at, again, you're coming from the outside, but when you look at a situation, you've been in situations where you've won, you've been in where they've lost, and you start tough starts, better starts, etc. What kind of things do you look for to see, like, could a team get out of this? And when you look at these guys, you like, because again, there have been last couple of years, they've looked terrible, and then suddenly they play better. So what little things do you see to say, well, they could do this because of that? Or is there hope here, or is there not hope?
Well, there's always hope. And there were teams that I was on that probably didn't have as much hope as we would have thought as a team. But you don't necessarily always see that. I don't think they look at themselves as a bad football team. They've played a couple games that would be, in my opinion, pretty bad football, including that Chicago, which was really not good football. So that's one of those ones. Yeah, there's hope. And it's funny because there's a couple different scenarios. Like Joe Gibbs would sit down and say, okay, here's what we have coming up. And at least the next 4 games, it wasn't always just win a game. It's next game. It was, okay, if we can beat, if we could beat Chicago this week, then we have Dallas coming next week. That's a game that we could win. And we'll find a way to get back to, 3-4 or 4-4. And then this is exactly where we would be at 4-4 in our conference, in our division. And he would lay it out. And I think it's hard not to do that as a coach, because that is one thing that you could say one game at a time as much as you want. The players know exactly where they stand and exactly what it is. There's that, but then there's also the Mike Shanahan. We're going to evaluate everybody at 3-6, and and then you make a run. And it seemed like they were. I don't think Mike was quitting on a year when he said that. I still don't believe that he was quitting on a year. I think he probably misspoke just a little bit, but there's always hope for that. I think it's a little bit dimmer when you look at the division.
Yeah.
Like Philly's unbelievable right now. Dallas is a really good ball club, and that they played tough with Philly for a while, and New York's all of a sudden coming on, and New York's doing some things, and you're looking around going, okay, well, where are we fitting into this? But right now, kind of with an extra game and an extra playoff team, 2-4 isn't the exact same 2-4 as it was 5 years ago or 4 years ago.
Right.
It's find a way to get back to 4-4 or 4-5, and we got to grow as a team, and we'll make a run. But we got to win a couple games right now. Like, you got to find a way to win a couple games right now. And they have a schedule that lends to winning some games here in the next stretch. So done is not really where you'd go with it.
Is Rivera's messaging confusing to you at times?
Well, I'm not in it the way you're in it. And so I don't sit and see. It's the funny thing when you're not that close to a team is you hear, what's been the problem? Quarterback.
Right.
Yeah. And I would not say that Rivera's strong suit is messaging. He's not a wordsmith up there. And I don't think he always understands. Like, I think he knows a lot of the times exactly what he's saying and why he's saying it. But I don't think he knows that nobody else hears it that way.
Right.
In a lot of ways, it's a lot like my wife and I talking about what we're doing as far as building the new house. And I say fashions. She says, what? That's actually not true. She knows what fashion is. But a lot of times we're saying the same thing or we're agreeing on something, but we don't know how to, it's a different language to some extent. I think with Ron, in a lot of cases, he doesn't hear how it's perceived in another way. Maybe. So yeah, confusing would be a good answer for that. I think his intentions are probably, I believe his intentions for his team are really good. And it seems like the guys do want to play for Ron. I also see a guy that gets frustrated a lot with the media when maybe he doesn't need to get his, I think he has different expectations. Like, the media's out to get him sometimes. You're like, they're just doing their job asking the questions that they're supposed to ask. I mean, move.
And Scott Turner, any thoughts?
I think Scott's struggling right now. I'm not exactly sure, though, when you think about it, is he struggling to some extent with quarterback and what Carson Wentz can handle on his plate? Is he struggling with some creativity? They've really been limited as far as what they're doing offensively, especially in some of the third down passing situations. A couple weeks ago against Philly, with what they wanted to do to handle what was really a 3-3 defense that, it looks like a 3-4 front, but it's just one backer and they didn't run the ball very much. But it's a lot of basic crossing concepts and shallow cross concepts and mesh concepts. And a lot of it's hinging on, some underneath guys getting open and everything. For right now, when teams are playing them, it's just too easy to pass off most of those concepts when that's what they're running, and that's the consistent flow of what they're running. There's an answer, and the defense has an answer, and you got to make it hard, and you got to make it different as a coordinator. And where I know it can be different is in that first game, you could tell that Turner spent some time in the offseason putting some things together. Like, they came out first game against Jacksonville, and they had 7 or 8 unique things that Turner hadn't really done and that you hadn't seen much of. And I'm surprised that he hasn't gone back to some of those things. Like a great example, early in the Jacksonville game, they ran a diamond set to Carson Wentz's left, and they ran a couple crossers, and on the outside, Samuel runs a whip back under all of it. And I haven't seen a diamond look since that week.
No.
I think that they haven't ran any diamond set since that week. So you got to be better formationally to challenge defenses, especially when you're running the same type of plays and the same type of stuff. And I just don't think there's enough variation with personnel group and formation to tell a defense we're doing something different or expect something different. Sure. That was also interesting. Like, Joe Gibbs had the most limited playbook of all time, but it looked different every week.
Chris, I got to get going. You're the best. I'm going to cut off on Zoom, so I appreciate your time, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle. Always a pleasure, buddy.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Chris for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I will be back on Thursday talking to ESPN Packers reporter Rob Demovsky. Yes, there's a game on Sunday, and yes, it still matters. So please tune in. Do me a favor and do that for your boy. I will talk to you next time.